like dust. I mean, you can sneeze and blow about 2 million of them over a tray. And so this machine,
Have you seen Heather lately? Boy, she looks fantastic, don't you think? I'm here at Bloom River Gardens outside Eugene, Oregon to get some tips on how to grow her. Mark Bloom, co-owner of the nursery, is here to show us around. Mark, sometimes heathers get a really bad rap. Why is that?
Well, there are probably a couple things. One is that people tend to plant them in areas where they don't get good drainage. You'll notice here that we've tried to put our heathers on slopes.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And very simply in doing that, even with heavy irrigation, the water drains off. It doesn't stay with the plant.
So like location, 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 it's drainage, drainage, drainage.
It really is.
Now they've grown in Scotland, which I think is a very wet climate.
They obviously get lots of rain, but the areas where they grow, it's very peaty, lots of peat moss, and that does drain well.
Even despite your best efforts, sometimes they can still be picky.
That's right, that's right. We actually have areas in the garden where they do succumb to nature, and it's best to rip them out and put something else in.
So instead of just cutting them back, you suggest digging them up and putting in a new one?
I do.
Just fight the good fight and move on.
That's right.
How about if you show me how to plant one? I could use that.
Sure, sure.
All right. All right, Mark, how deep do I need to dig the hole for you?
Really not any deeper than the crown of the plant.
Okay.
And so what we want to show here is that the crown of the plant is no deeper than the surrounding, actually, let me add a little bit there, the surrounding soil line.
And you've used about a 4-to-1 mixture of rocks and also a real humusy material because they really like acid soil?
They like acid and they like good drainage.
Okay, well, you know what? There's not much to that if we can just make it through the winter. I really appreciate the pointers. And I got Val, your wife, waiting for me. She's going to give me some designing tips. Thanks.
Great idea. You betcha. You betcha.
This is Val Bloom of Bloom River Garden. She designed this. Oh, Val, it's so beautiful. You really have done a spectacular job. Why do you love heathers and heaths so much?
I love heathers because of the colors and the textures and how one day you'll walk through the garden and the foliage is green and the next day you see a little tip of color and pretty soon, a few days later, the whole thing is in full bloom. And there are 2 times of year when that happens, and one is late winter, early spring, and then again in late summer, and the whole garden just comes alive with color.
One thing that I noticed just looking out over this vista is it's not just the flower colors that are different, the foliage is so different in color. It really varies.
There are so many wonderful heathers out there right now. It used to be you could just find a pink one or a white one, but so much emphasis has been on the foliage now, and so you get a heather, for instance, like firefly here.
What a good name for it.
And you wonder why you would call it firefly, because it's basically green now and it's got the lavender flower, but in the fall this starts turning yellows and orange, and by the time you're into winter, it's a fiery red-orange, and that foliage will last for several months. And so even though things aren't blooming, you can still have all that color.
Now, I noticed that you've planted them in big, long, sweeping drifts, which is so beautiful to look at. It really is pleasing to the eye. Why did you do that instead of just planting one here and one there?
Because I think that it would get, the color and the texture would get lost if you just had one or had several different kinds planted together. You can really appreciate those drifts of colors and textures and different shades.
So you got to remember that heathers like to be together. The same varieties, put them together.
I don't know if the heathers like to be together, but as a gardener, I love to plant them together.
And you think that's the way that they look, that they're absolute best?
Right, I think so. And they're also different heights, so that you get a drift and you're continuing that same height.
One thing I want to have learned from you today is how to cut them back, because if you want them to flower next year, you're going to have to shear them like a sheep. Can you show me?
You really need to cut them back after they bloom, and what you do is just I'm not going to actually cut because these are just coming into
Wrong
bloom.
time of year.
But just take and cut underneath the dead flowers, and you can just shear them round like you're shearing a sheep.
Okay, so you want to get down to the green part below
Right.
the flower
Right.
stem. Okay,
Right.
well that seems fairly easy. And so what's the best time of year do you think to do that, to cut them back?
There'd probably be 2 times a year since they're either
Spring bloomers
spring bloomers
or fall bloomers.
or fall bloomers. And after the plant has bloomed is when you want to cut it back.
All right, Val, it's absolutely beautiful. Thanks for sharing your pruning techniques with me today.
Thank you.
One more use for heather you might not have thought of, it makes a great cut flower. The bouquet lasts about a week in a vase inside the house. You know, this is so lovely. I think I'm just gonna sit and enjoy it for a while.
Photosynthetic process.
And it'll kind of start to shrivel up.
That's right. And so here we have a long